We've got a Craftsman 190cc pressure washer here. Customer brought it in and said that it won't start. No matter what they do, they can't get any fire out of it. I'm going to show you the most common issues that would cause something like this and what to do to fix those. So the very first thing I like to do with something like this, I like to check the oil. Now, if you're checking the oil and you're smelling any kind of fuel smell to it or anything like that, you're going to want to change that oil out before you even try to start it. This stuff's not great color, kind of got a silver color to it, but it doesn't smell bad at all. It's the right level. If it's real high or anything, you want to drain it before you try to start it. That could be part of your issue. A lot of times people will have so much oil in it that they just won't start. The next thing I like to do is check the spark. Now I've got a nice spark tester here. We use a spark checker. If you don't have that, you can hold the spark plug, you can take it out and you can hold it just against the muffler or against the block anywhere and pull it over slowly. See if you actually get spark in between the tip of that and the outside arm that comes over. Not a very bad thing to do, not a very difficult thing to do. Good place to start. It's showing low spark for some reason. Oh, I just got a little pop out of it there. I don't know what that was caused from, but it's showing good spark now. So after you've checked the spark, the next thing you want to address is the fuel. You want to make sure that the fuel in the unit is a good quality, that it's a good fuel, and that it's going to run your unit well. Now this stuff does look pretty clear. It almost looks too clear though. I wonder if it's been sitting in there and just lost all of its octane and it's not any good for the unit anymore. We're going to find out for sure. What you want to do is you want to go ahead and pull the cover off. We know we have spark at this point. You can feel when pulling it that we've got good compression. If you're pulling it and it's pulling over just super easy, you're going to want to address that. You could have an issue with a valve stuck in the valve cover. You can take that off, see if you got a valve stuck or something like that. That's not the case here. This thing feels good when we're pulling it over, like it's got good compression. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and address a carburetor issue because it seems like we're not getting any fuel. Now if we look down inside, the choke is coming back closed. So if you look at that choke plate, if it's closed, that's good. You want it to be closed when it's going to start. That's what the ready start is about. Now it does look like somebody's put this together and has a wire that's hitting on your ready start assembly or your idle down assembly, I believe is what that is. So that's not good. We want to address that when we have this thing apart, but it looks like somebody's definitely messed with this thing at this point. But it's getting a good choke to it. If it was getting good fuel, it'd fire right up. So what we're going to do is we're going to just spray a little bit of starting fluid into the carburetor here, right at the front of that choke, and see if we can't get it to fire up. Now if you don't have starting fluid, you can dribble a little bit of gas down in there. That works real well, but you just want to get it an alternative fuel supply to see if it'll fire. Got it on. Going to run it too long since it's a power washer. You don't want to run them for more than a few seconds without water flowing to them. But with getting an alternative fuel supply, this thing fires right up and it runs perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this carburetor apart, we're going to get it cleaned up, get the fuel system flushed, and we're going to get this thing back taken care of. Now if it will not start on starting fluid or on fuel at that point, if you can't get it to fire up, you know you've either got an issue with the compression or a valve stuck or something else going on besides this. You know, you can double check your spark plug. Sometimes that's the issue, but not very often. From there, we've just got a couple bolts to take out the front or a couple screws. Now the two outside ones are just two 8mm. So those are the two outside ones they just unscrew, and the two inside ones are 7mm. So it's kind of a strange, almost nobody uses 7mm screws, but that's what Briggs uses on these two that screw directly into the face of the carb there. So we're going to take this out and away. Now move that line out of the way. Now this is a vent line for the fuel tank. You want that there, otherwise sometimes fuel will get through it. Like this, you notice there's a little fuel in it. Sometimes fuel will come through it, and at least it gets sucked into the intake this way, as opposed to just leaking all over the place. Now, I'm not sure why that's not springing back quite like it should. It probably got a little bit of warm, I guess, when I just had it out there. That's kind of strange. Yeah, so that, not sure which side that's supposed to go on. He had it like this, which does look right, but we'll figure that out here in just a second. We're gonna drain this fuel. So I'm gonna get a bucket to drain it into. And basically at this point we know we have a carburetor issue because we just tested it. We just proved that it'd fire right up on an alternative fuel supply but wouldn't start otherwise. So take your fuel line off. It's good to take that clamp off and then you can grab the line and twist while it's still on the nipple there, and then you can pull it off. It's easier that way, otherwise it doesn't break the seal and you have an issue getting it off. A lot of times you'll rip the fuel line. The rest of it just comes straight off. There is a spring here. You can pull it to the left and out, nice and easy. And then the whole assembly pulls out. So once you've got it past everything, there's also another spring here. And you just pull it to the right and up and off. A little easier said than done. I'm not sure if you got a good view there, but let me go ahead and take it off this side so you can see. We pull this up and to the left. Now that'll just sit there, or you can take it off. Either way, doesn't really matter. It is a little bit stretched. I'm not going to worry too much about that, but we're just going to put it down just like that so we can put it on back the same way it came off. Now the one in the back here you can also take off at this point, or you can leave it on either way. Once you get everything forward though, you'll tip it up and remove that. That is the, there's a disc for your choke, and basically when it heats up, it'll let your choke open. It'll push this way and open the choke. So it's actually supposed to be on the back side, not on the front side. So he did have that on wrong, but seems like that's not springing back quite like it should either. It wasn't coming all the way. We'll address that in a minute. But then on the back side piece here, we'll take it off. It just kind of tips to the side. And on this, we'll take it off, and I'm gonna set it like this because that's the way it goes back on. So I'm just gonna set it down. Now we've got the carburetor completely loose. So we're draining the fuel. Now on the back side there is an O-ring and an adapter. Now I like to go ahead and put those back on now. Just put the O-ring in there and then the adapter just snaps in. Perfect. So it's back together. You don't have to worry about it anymore at this point. We'll address this carburetor. Now there is a gasket here on the front. You want to make sure that that stays on there, that's good. It's not completely flat. If it's completely flat, you'll draw stuff in between the air filter cover and it over time. But it's good. If you run your fingernail across there and all you can feel is both sides of the plastic as opposed to the O-ring, then you know it's bad. Now the bottom here is a 7mm also. So we'll take the two 7mm bolts off. And then what I like to do is just flip it. Now I am dripping gas all over the place. I'm prepared for this, but make sure that you're not dripping it in a place where you don't want fuel. So I'm just gonna take my pliers and I'm gonna pry on one side like such, and it's gonna break that seal. So on the inside, it doesn't look horrible in here at all. I just wonder if that fuel wasn't good fuel. It doesn't smell real good. It looks kind of strange, but it looked clear. I wonder if it's just went stale. Next thing I do is I'm gonna remove the pin for the float and the needle. So you just pry straight up like that. It'll all pop straight out. Your needle just sits just like that in there. Now we were gonna clean all this up before we put it back together, but you can put it back in exactly the same way we just took it out. What I like to do with this here, which is the emulsion tube, is I like to take my needle nose pliers and just pry up. It comes right out. So I'm just taking it against the side and I'm taking one piece of the needle and I'm just prying straight up and out. So that whole assembly up and out. Now it usually doesn't get stuck like this, but sometimes the plastic piece from the inside will get stuck down in there. You can take and pull it straight out just like such also. Now you want to try not to damage this. This stuff can be damaged pretty easily. So we're going to clean that all out while we have it out. That's your emulsion tube up through. I'm going to put it back together first actually, instead of trying to clean it apart. It's not a big deal if it's together or apart either way. But just push that back on there. You've got jets here and here. You want to make sure while you're cleaning that those don't come out. Those will come out sometimes. So we use carburetor cleaner to clean this. Otherwise you can use an ultrasonic cleaner. You can use anything really you want. You can use gas. Gas will eat away a lot of it most of the time, but as long as you're getting this thing completely cleaned out. You want everything that's in here completely clean. The one we have is not real dirty, but you want to pay real close attention to this tube if your unit is all gummed up. If you're seeing a bunch of green gunk or varnish or anything anywhere, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pull this assembly apart, and you're going to want to pay attention to these holes down through the emulsion tube. Now, you can use torch tip cleaners, you can use really anything you want to clean it out. Pieces of a wire loom. If you use a bigger wire brush, it'd probably work pretty great for this. But basically you want to make sure these holes straight through are all the way clear. Now, on this one, it's not dirty whatsoever. It's perfectly clear. I think it may just be the bad gas in it or whatever, but a lot of times they'll get varnish all up inside, even on the inside. You want to clean all that out. All this should be 100% free. These O-rings should be in good shape. I'll show you a little more about the O-rings in a minute, but especially on these jets. These jets, you want to be sure that they're 100% clear. If they're not, it will run bad. If there's any varnish or anything in here, all it's going to do is gather right back up, and you're going to be right back in the same boat here shortly. So if all these are cleared out though, as long as you have something to fit down in there, again, just a wire loom from a wire brush, if you pull one out, they work great to get in these tight crevices to where you can't reach with anything else, especially if you don't have anything else handy. So even just a couple pieces of it and work around, and even on the inlet right before you go in. So work that on around, just get all that stuff out of there. That way you have a nice clean emulsion tube, and I don't know, I'd call this maybe a fuel chamber of some sort. And then it just pushes all back together and gets reinstalled. I'm gonna go ahead and spray all down through these jets, through the inlet, through the whole unit, and just get it completely clean. There's not a whole lot to clean on these. And this thing's not too dirty, so it's nice and quick and easy for me. But one thing to pay attention to is if this rubber here is jacked up at all, if it's not a perfect tip there, if you've got any kind of deviation from a perfect tip, you're going to want to replace this needle. Otherwise you'll end up with fuel inside the crankcase. It'll just keep leaking past. So, oh, the tip just fell off. I'm not sure that I've ever had that happen, but it's not in bad shape, so we're not really going to worry too much about that. Looks like it just goes straight back on there. So, oh, drop the needle for the float, or I'm sorry, the pin for the float. I'm going to just put that back together and set it to the side for now. And then I'm going to blow everything off with air. Again, you want to be sure that all this is 100% clean. If there's anything left on it, that's all going to go right back in that jet of your carburetor. And with as small as that jet is, it's going to clog it up. So now that everything's clean, we can go ahead and put it back together. We can go ahead and, if you look down in here, there's one way that has kind of an area that sticks up further. That's the part that the O-ring goes in. Now you want to make sure these gaskets are good. If not, you'll get bad running out of it too. So make sure that those gaskets are in good shape. Now we'll go ahead and just push that whole assembly back down in there. It should seat firmly. If you don't see a good seat out of it, those O-rings are probably bad. Now I'm going to leave my needle or my pin in there, and I'm going to put my needle back in. It just slides straight in. So slide straight down in, and then we're just going to slide it in from the top. And as soon as we get everything lined up, you can just push that straight down from the top. Now you get good action out of it. So it's moving your needle up and down as we're moving. No adjustment or anything on these. Make sure there's nothing left in the bottom of there, otherwise you will have issues again. So you can just push the other piece back on. Make sure your holes line up as you're doing it. All right. Now there is some big Allen head down here that's got an O-ring around it. I never take that out. I'm not really sure what it's for, if it's a drain or what it is, but kind of pointless on this in my opinion. Go ahead and tighten our screws back up. They don't need to be real tight on this. You're just screwing into plastic, so you over tighten them and you'll strip them out, that's for sure. So let's go ahead and get this thing back together and see how it runs after we've got it back together. Now I just drained the whole tank out here. Might have a little left. We're gonna flush it out too, so we're gonna take the air compressor and blow in through there. Make sure everything's out and it's 100% dry before putting some fresh fuel in. Now on these, it doesn't really take much to dry them out because the outlet is on the direct bottom and there's a filter in there. It'll usually blow everything right back out if you go ahead and do it like that. Very, very easy to do, so we're happy with that. Now that we've got everything cleaned and ready to go, all we have to do is put it back together. So start off with your spring and go straight down in like such, and then we can pull it over to the other side. You want the bottom that splits on the bottom, or the part that splits on the bottom. So we can kind of pull it over this piece of metal here and latch it on down in. So we want that there. And then on the other side here, what we're going to do is we're going to remove this wire from the bottom, and we're going to go ahead and put it back up through on the other side like it should have been. That way it doesn't interfere with any of this linkage. Now this linkage here, that's your auto throttle. It'll idle down with your pump if your pump doesn't need as much RPM. That controls it there, but you want both of these on top of that linkage. You don't want them on the bottom side of that linkage to hold it up anywhere. Now this spring, this piece here just stretches over the little assembly there, and it sits just like such. So we've got the other spring here. Now this spring, it's supposed to sit just like this because that'll open your choke as you're going. Now I am going to throw a little bit of lube on that shaft of that choke there in order to keep it going freely. I'm going to just keep it freed up a little bit, some penetrating lube. Seems like the carb cleaner actually helped quite a bit, but we want it to snap all the way back. As long as our choke's closed, it should snap all the way back. I'm sorry, as long as our throttle's open, it should snap all the way back. So what we're going to do is we're going to get this governor linkage, and it just goes down and in. And next we're going to get the choke linkage, and it goes at an angle. You just kind of pull it up and get it in there like such. Okay, and then we'll get this spring kind of out of the way it doesn't interfere. And we're going to push that assembly back onto the back where that O-ring sits. You should kind of feel it snap down in there real well. It should fit tight. And then this spring, just came off, so that's good. You can put it on either way. You can do it afterwards. It just goes on the bottom and comes back out to the side. All right, you pull it straight over, and it sits kind of down into that hole there. So that's good. And then this one, you pull it over, and it comes right into the thing here. So that's good. Yeah, so that's not, something's not right about that, because we're supposed to be an idle down here. Yeah, so that piece where he's got it hooked up to is definitely not the right way, because we're supposed to be idling down this unit with that. That's pulling our choke open, so that's completely wrong. So I just went and took a look at the diagram, and it does look like this spring is the right position for this. So this spring is supposed to go at the front like it was from this little actuator here to the choke. Now it's not, something's not right, because the choke shouldn't be open when it's in a resting position. So as I was getting a little bit further and doing a little further inspection, down here at the bottom, if we look, it looks like there's marks on here where somebody has moved the adjustment that comes off of the pump itself. And it does throttle the unit down right here. So as the choke gets pulled, or not the choke, but the pump piece gets pulled, it changes the tension on our spring, is what it does here. So it changes that tension as it gets pulled. It goes more or less tension on the governor spring itself here. So that's it's a multi-spring process. Not real familiar with it, so sorry about that. But we're going to adjust this back to where it should be. Now, you can already see the mark, so we know it's supposed to come all the way out there like such and be tightened back down. Now, if you don't know where it goes or there aren't any marks, I think essentially what needs to happen is it needs to be in the unit there and then pulled all the way tight, and that's when there's no pressure in it. So as long as it's... So at that point, now our choke is where it should be. So that may have been part of the issue why this wouldn't start. He had this other piece on the other side, and then also had this adjusted. Had a lot of things going on here that weren't right. So sometimes it's a puzzle putting things back together, and people normally don't tell you, hey, I had that all apart, I messed with that. You know, so it's kind of hard sometimes to put things back together that you didn't take apart and that you're not familiar with, especially without a diagram. So the wire being on the wrong side or kind of, you know, binding everything up was kind of a telltale sign though. You know, when you see wires in the way of different things, you can pretty much bet good money that somebody's been into it and messed with something. So as we put this back together, we want to be sure that our breather tube here on the back gets put back in, and then also our tube here in the front goes back where it's supposed to and is actually there. We call those the EPA tubes. Basically, the only reason they're there is because of EPA requirements. Now you can look at everything in the back and you're gonna want to make sure everything is free, everything's working correctly, all those springs are correct. And everything is correct on this. I don't see anything wrong. Just wanted to show a little bit of the linkage and everything and how everything here works. If we're moving it, where all the springs go. And it's a little back tab there. Both of the wires go on the top. And then this piece actually moves back and forth coming out of the pump for your throttle down. Now there's another spring on the back side up underneath here. But that's how it all goes. Should tell you everything you need to know about the linkages. Wanted to get a nice close-up and document that because there's not a lot of documentation out there on them. Everything is looking good, so we're going to put the two back in the outside. Oop, maybe. One didn't want to go in there real well. Usually on one like this where you don't got a lot of room, I like to use a magnetized one. They work a little bit better. So it just sucks to the socket as opposed to having to hold it there. But anyway, now we've got that back on, we can put our air filter back in. Most of the time the air filters on these are pretty clean because you're not power washing where there's a bunch of grass or anything like that. So now everything seems to be functioning good, or at least I hope it is, now that we've had to put together a puzzle with it. Now let's throw some fuel down in this. Now we use ethanol-free fuel. We also treat it with Phaser 3000. Now the Phaser just kind of keeps the water back mixed in throughout the unit, or mixed back in throughout the gas, just in case it accumulates any moisture. If you're having anything sit around, make sure the tank is filled all the way up. If you don't, you're gonna have issues eventually with it. So on there, as it's sitting here idling, it's idling at a low RPM, and there's a reason for that, because it's an idle down pressure washer. So that should tell you pretty much everything you need to know. Hopefully that gives you enough information about the whole spring system and everything to get it back together and get everything working correctly, and how to diagnose and take care of the issue on one of these should the issue arise. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.